Aye.
Thanks to our project maintenance and land management staff for the two information items on the agenda at 4.1 and 4.2. On the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes for the June 9th board meeting, approval of the check registers, the general checking account, the surety account, and the 325 Lake Road checking account. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
On to reports. On the 21st of June, I chaired the Comprehensive Plan Policy Advisory Committee. It was the last scheduled meeting of that group. They'll have other chances to review drafts as they come forward, but that was the last scheduled meeting. And they discussed a variety of topics, the district's role in various management topics, including long-term need for best management practices, wetland management, chloride management, bacteria management, climate change adaptation, quality of species, groundwater, and the state buffer law. And of course, those will be coming back to us as policy decisions as they're developed further on. That same day, Manager Miller and I, together with Administrator Erdahl, Mr. Whisper, and Ms. Clark, met with the Hopkins City Council and some staff there for a tour of the boardwalk in the Greenway. The minutes for the combined committee meeting are in the packet, so I won't belabor that. Managers Blixt and Robbins, you attended the Metro Mod Summer Tour?
Yes. But actually Bill Olson was there as well. But Pam was not. And it was really a very enjoyable time. I really thought it was anyway. Focus was on Winona, Lake Pepin, and the Whitewater watershed, and so we focused on Pepin and the flood of 2007 that really had a great impact on the Whitewater State Park and those other little valleys around there. We were on a boat to do a tour. We saw tons of eagles, and we were on a bus and we visited a couple of farms, a big dairy operation, and can you imagine a farm that has 1,485 head of dairy cows on it, and an automated system that made that milking operation really very smooth. Bill, you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, they actually milk those cows 3 times a day, and they want to expand, but they do have a 15 head limit in the area in the county, so they're working on that. The other thing is that we went to a very organic farm, Earthby Glad Farm, where everything is grass-fed, and all the Black Angus are treated like kings. And we also had a chance to learn why robins are present all year round in Minnesota now. And the reason they're here the whole time is that the black or the little dark berries you see on the buckthorn is the fruit source. And every time they eat a berry, they can't digest the seed particle, so when they get rid of it, they fertilize it at the same time, and more buckthorn is born. And so they have a food source all winter now. So that was part of the presentation on the riverboat with the eagle studies and all the other stuff that went along with it. So it was very, very well done. Incredibly good tour. I was glad I was able to get to go to it this year.
Thank you very much. The planning and policy committee minutes are available. Manager Miller, do you want to add anything?
No, I think they're very complete. I want to thank the staff for work they did to compile them.
They were thorough. Were there any other meetings or events that managers attended that I can report on? Thank you very much. The upcoming meeting and event schedule is in the agenda to see. And we'll go to item 10.1, which is a permit 15-675. Ms. Quinn. And there is a one-sentence addition to the report that's in the permit application.
On the-
May I?
Yep.
At the fourth bullet point under recommendation, the sentence is added, for the purpose of locating the present buffer, the applicant will be required to establish the edge of wetlands. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Quinn.
Thank you. President White, Board of Managers, tonight I'm bringing forward permit 15675 for a proposed private drive to be extended from an existing cul-de-sac that currently has a wetland buffer declared to the property, and the proposed drive will be impacting that buffer. Therefore, the applicant has requested for a variance to the wetland protection rule, and that's why the permit is being brought to you tonight. So we'll walk through the location, the details of the project, the rules triggered, and then wrap up. So the project is located south of Highway 5 and southwest of downtown Victoria. The parcel in red is Hartman Communities property. Jerry Hartman is present here today. The parcel in yellow is owned by U.S. Homes, which is also was developed by Lennar and is the Rapsing North Second Edition subdivision. So to kind of give you a perspective, Carl Cray Lake is the lake that the Hartman property abuts. And to zoom in a little bit more, so the proposed drive would be extending off of this cul-de-sac here to provide access to the Hartman property to the north. There is currently a wetland, which I'll show on the next slide, on that property that is a management class preserve, so there's a 75-foot buffer required. Prior to 2013, when we issued the permit for the subdivision for the U.S. Homes property, Hartman Communities actually owned this parcel as well. They sold it to Lennar with the mutual understanding that a easement would be granted to construct a drive from this cul-de-sac to the property to the north. So here, this is from our map, preserved wetland, and so you can see this pinch point. So through the permit with the subdivision, wetland protection rule was triggered, and so there's a 75-foot buffer that is declared all the way to the property edge on the U.S. Homes property. So please note that the orientation of this picture has changed. So north is this way and east is this way. So to fit it on the screen, here's the cul-de-sac of interest. So this is the U.S. Homes property, the Hartman property. And so they're proposing to extend the drive. This would be the pinch point where the buffer currently is to provide the access. Staff has reviewed this project as an extension of the previously permitted subdivision. Therefore, the driveway is triggering erosion control, stormwater management, wetland protection, and water body crossings and structures. So for the wetland protection rule, as I mentioned, a buffer has already been declared to the U.S. Homes property. It is highlighted in red on this screen. So here you can see the required 75-foot. This is actually Teller's land over here, and that's why it doesn't extend all the way over. The minimum 50% of base buffer width at 37.5. Currently, because of the property line, this is only actually about 25 feet. And Hartman Communities is proposing to reduce that buffer width to approximately 10 feet in order to install this driveway. So constructing the proposed drive will permanently impact approximately 3,000 square feet of existing buffer and temporarily disturb another 3,000 square feet that will be restored through a maintenance and monitoring plan for 5 years. To meet the intent of the wetland protection buffer requirement, the applicant is proposing to slant the drive away from the wetland and will be providing soil amendments to infiltrate the runoff. So still infiltrating the runoff as the current buffer does right now. And I have a slide that shows that detail coming up. And then additionally, the applicant has estimated what the requirement for the buffer would be in the event that a single-family home is built on the Hartman property, and it has provided an additional 20 feet of buffer based on that estimation, resulting in a total of a 50-foot buffer. And then as outlined in condition number 4 in the permit report, the applicant will be declaring the buffer to the property with the stipulation that the required buffer will be adjusted at the time the property is developed, and then that additional 20 feet will be added on to that. So in the event that the 30-foot requirement changes, there'll still be the additional 20 feet of buffer. Given the area, the applicant is proposing approximately just under 17,000 square feet of additional buffer for the 3,000 square feet that they are permanently impacting. So in summary, the applicant has requested for a variance since they cannot meet the minimum required buffer width. Staff feel that the applicant has provided justification to meet the variance requirements, particularly looking at alternatives on where to install the drive. So this is the Teller parcel here, and they looked at coming up off the Tellers Road to the north. However, they were unable to gain an easement for the construction of that road. The other option would be not to build a road at all, which would deem the site unbuildable because of the geographic constraints. So you have wetland here, and this is actually very steep behind here as well. And then really one of the other things they had proposed were to go through the wetland, which would be more impact than reducing the buffer width. So, as I mentioned, staff feels that they've provided justification that the hardship was not created by the landowner. Granting the variance will not serve as a convenience. It's not caused by economic hardship, and that they are still meeting the spirit of the wetland protection rule. Yes, Manager Olson.
Can you go back a slide? How far is that curve involved with the tilting away from the wetland? Is it just in one point, or is it that whole yellow section?
So, here's the detail of that. So it's a less than a 3% slope, but it will be pitched. So this is the cross section that I have for the drive.
It starts from where to where?
I believe it is the entire
So the
drive.
entire drive?
Because, so for the stormwater management portion, so this diagram also shows the soil amendments, approximately 17,000 square feet in green here.
Okay.
So it'll be pitched towards the soil.
Tremendous. Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Hartman is indicating that the entire drive has
Yep.
that.
Outstanding,
Yeah.
thanks.
So that concludes the wetland protection portion. So as I mentioned, the drive is being reviewed as a extension of the previously permitted subdivision, which was required to treat for phosphorus rate and volume control for the site's entire impervious surface. Therefore, the driveway is also being required to treat for phosphorus rate and volume control for the new impervious surface that they are proposing. They're doing so mainly by soil amendments, which will be done with 4 inches of scarification and incorporating 2 inches of compost to a depth of 8 inches. What the applicant has proposed meets the district's stormwater requirements. So during the fall of 2015, the applicant was allowed, we gave them permission to stockpile soils under permit 13-387, which was the Lennar permit for the subdivision, and they were maintaining compliance for erosion control under that permit. During that time, the applicant graded for the proposed drive without impacting the established and declared buffer, and installed an 18-inch culvert, which was observed earlier this month, bringing this to an after-the-fact permit for water body crossings and structures. So as a requirement of the rule, the applicant has submitted hydraulic analysis showing no upstream or downstream negative impacts, and has met the other requirements of the rule. The design alternatives are the same that I walked through for the alternatives for the variance. Furthermore, they are proposing to leave a sediment basin to the south here that will allow sediment to settle out before draining into the existing buffer area, providing more water quality treatment than what's existing. And kind of finally, for the water body crossing structures, they're exempt from providing aquatic and upland wildlife passage per section 3D4 for a low traffic road serving a single parcel that's won't exceed 40 miles an hour. And finally, the erosion control rule is triggered. The applicant has provided a silt fence that encloses the area of disturbance, which is shown at a dashed red line. They have also provided a double silt fence around the existing buffer and wetland area. They'll be using the existing paved cul-de-sac for their construction entrance, and we'll be stabilizing with 6 inches of topsoil and then seeding with MnDOT Mix 33-261, which was recommended by staff, which will also serve as a buffer mix for the disturbed areas as well. So in conclusion, staff feels that the project meets the district rules and has provided adequate justification to grant the variance request. Recommend approval with the conditions laid out in the permit report, and point out, as President White did earlier, the red line addition of verification of the established wetland edge to determine the appropriate buffer width based on that edge. And I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Just a reminder that we should take this in two parts, because a variance, which only applies to the wetland protection, requires a 2/3 vote of the board, which is 5 of us, I guess, and then the rest is a simple majority vote. But are there any questions? Well, first of all, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Are there questions of Ms. Quinn or Mr. Hartman? Manager Brooks.
I don't know if it's of Ms. Quinn or Mr. Hartman, I'm not sure who the question, but it just strikes me that the variance is, the hardship is to access the property for which nothing is being proposed to be built. So I'm confused as to why there's a need for a driveway. I mean, so is it?
He likes to fish. Wants access to the lake. He's a developer. I mean, you got to presume there's going to be some houses up there.
But that's not.
Mr. Hartman, would you care to answer?
Well, yeah, we would like to develop the property for a single-family residence. We looked at it and could have divided it up more, but sewer and water and all that became very restrictive to get it in there for 3 lots and such, so we decided we'll develop it 1 lot and market it for that lot as one. But in order to market it, we need to get access to it so the potential buyer can understand and get on it and see what it's all about. And of course,
we'd like to know what we're selling somebody, you know, what's gonna be encumbered on the lot and all of that type of thing. So it's a process, but the intent is to sell it for a single-family residence.
I see.
Benjamin?
Could you go to the picture on the left? It shows where the house would probably be built. You know, these graphics are great. It's really a good presentation, but I'm a little
Maybe
north always isn't up and down on the
It's
thing,
just
so I get a little
just the one
confused.
picture, the north isn't.
North is up on this one.
Yeah.
Well, this would be the buildable area.
Okay.
And then on one of her drawings, there's a setback line of pretty imposed 150 feet that's about like here from the wetland.
Okay,
So we're seeing, you know, somewhere in this location that
terrific.
residence would be built.
Thank you. I was just a little concerned with.
Yeah.
From the city standpoint, they'd be allowed a house and a little accessory building
Sure.
if they wanted.
Okay.
This is where I flip it around. I'm Drew Miller, but this is the city setback line.
Mhm.
So they, for city ordinance, they won't be able to build any
Okay.
closer than there.
Terrific. Thank you.
I'm going to just ask for a vote if we're ready. If there's no problem with the 5, then we'll be good. You have a,
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify, the present motion is the variance of approval. Correct?
well, the motion was for the entire permit, because that's what's on our agenda, but I can break it down. If, however, yes, if we have 5 or more votes, we're good.
Would you like a motion to divide?
Is that the appropriate?
Well, it's typical to proceed in 2 steps,
Mhm.
and also the motion for the variance should incorporate findings on the variance criteria, which in this case can be done simply by proposing to adopt the staff memorandum, the findings in that document.
Manager Becker, thank you.
Would you like a motion to divide the question?
Yes, is that a
So moved.
motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So first we have may I have a motion to approve the variance to the wetland protection rule, with accepting the findings that support the 5 requirements for the variance that are contained within the packet, both the application and the staff report.
So moved.
Motion. Second. Discussion. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? Variance is approved. May I have a motion to approve the permits in total?
So moved.
Second.
Simultaneous motions. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Hartman, thank you. It's
Thank you.
Thank you.
Administrator's report, Mr. Erdahl.
Thank you, President White and managers. I have just a few quick updates. One of the first things I was going to mention was the tour with Hopkins Mayor and City Council and staff that President White already mentioned. Thanks to James and Renee for coordinating that tour, and for managers White and Miller for attending. It was a real positive opportunity to demonstrate, I think, some potential and some options for future development on both ends of that greenway. And so I think it was a very productive and positive meeting, and it was appreciated by city staff, and I think it was a good outing for the Watershed District as well. Also last week I attended what was called a City Goal Results Minneapolis roundtable discussion. I had been invited to the week prior. It was at Minneapolis City Hall, and it was focusing on healthy lakes, rivers, and streams. Minneapolis City Manager Spencer Cronk led the meeting, and it kind of focused on a fairly elementary level on understanding water quality measures, balancing conflicting priorities, and different types of local, regional, and state and national collaboration, and building awareness in the public. So I think that there may be some follow-up meetings. A lot of the other attendees were our kind of usual suspects and regular partners in other types of activities we work with the City of Minneapolis, Minneapolis Park and Rec Board, the Met Council, the Freshwater Society, and some MPCA and others that were participating in that meeting. Also, I wanted, and maybe this a notice went to all of you also, but I wanted to draw people's attention to a public comment period that was announced by Bowser for the buffer policy that they had. There's 7 policies that are up and open for public comment now through the 27th of July. So staff are kind of looking into that and looking at the options from a staff perspective, but I wanted to see if there's any direction for you. I've also been reached out to our government relations consultant to see if he could provide any guidance from either Maud and or other watershed districts in terms of some of the priorities that they're looking at, and then kind of carry forward. But we have some time to work on that, but I wanted to draw that to your attention. And there is Bowser has a buffer web page on their website too, if I could forward to people if that was useful to see that too. I want to highlight or recognize Tiffany Schoffer. She coordinated what's become an annual spring staff tour that happened earlier today, actually. Several of the staff toured. We either drove past or walked through Cottageville Park, 325 Blake Road, Powell Road, monitoring site, Japs Olson parking lot enhancements, Meadowbrook Golf Course, Methodist Hospital, the Minnehaha Creek Greenway, Union Congregational Church where a cost share BMP had been installed, the Southwest Calhoun Pond, in the Chain of Lakes, and then to the Grays Bay Dam. So we covered a lot of territory today, and Tiffany did a great job of kind of coordinating and herding cats and staff to keep everybody on. And she even arranged for the rain to be right at the only little bit of rain was while we were on the bus. So that staff controls both the Grays Bay Dam and the weather, evidently. So they did a great job. And I think it was a very informative tour for staff that don't get out of the office as much as some of the project and field staff. To see what we do in the field, I think that's extremely useful and productive, and just an opportunity for staff to kind of interact and get to know each other in a great way.
How many were able to go?
I did a head count. I think it was 25 or 26. I think. So we had a bus that took us around, and a few people stayed back to manage the home base. And then just as kind of I do frequently, we have the 10th annual Minnehaha Creek cleanup in less than a month. That's on Sunday, July 24th, so that's coming up pretty quickly. And then my last thing is just to wish everyone safe travels and a happy 4th of July wherever you may go.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask a question along you brought up the Powell Roads. I drove by, James, the Chelsea Boulevard Japs Olson project today, and I was absolutely amazed with the size of that project. Without our participation, how much of that could they have done?
We talked about, and James has been more closely involved in this, but we talked about the same thing. Seeing that on an aerial photo is one thing. It looked like they were going to add a little slice to the side of the building. But to actually be there on the site and right next to it and realize that part of that was the Hopkins and St. Louis Park swamp of annexation and all those things that had to happen for that to work. And the total acreage is it 3 acres of new building?
Yeah, it's 30 acres total with the parking, the old building,
right,
and the new addition, 30 acres.
Yeah.
But how much of the building could they have built with constrictions that the site provided without our help?
I mean, it was really about the technical feasibility of them being able to move water around it.
To pump, yeah.
I think 7 or 8 acres of that western expansion they needed to provide stormwater for and really had nowhere on site, so they would have had to greatly reduce. You've seen the size of the ponds. They would have had to accommodate those on the west side of their building somewhere, basically making, I think, the building infeasible, or the alternative that we landed on, had we not been involved, is they would have pumped water all the way around through a stormwater force main.
Because the site is just, I mean, the earth moving equipment looks like they were building an airport there. Good work on staff's part to facilitate that development.
I should probably also recognize the bus driver who took us back into some small little cul-de-sacs and out into areas where we could get out and walk onto Meadowbrook Golf Course and see where the creek is and the lake there, to look at the opportunities there. And then the same thing, trying to get through construction over to Grays Dam.
Bravo. Manager Blix.
My question is about the last, about the creek cleanup thing, and just wondering how the signups are coming with that.
You know, I'm not sure what the signups are. We had just a meeting earlier this week on Wednesday. We had a staff kind of get together and kind of the initial training to orient everybody and recruit and/or twist arms for participation. Even James is going to participate this year. Is the early report, and for the first time. For the first time.
But he's bringing the kids.
And all those volunteer assignments and the trainings are still coming. I'm not sure what the registration is been to date, though. I can follow up
Are you
with
asking
that.
how to sign up or how many people have signed up?
How many people have signed up to register? Yeah, I'm not sure. I can find out and share that information with you. I think in past years, it's been pretty slow up until just the last month or so. That's when we've gotten the bulk of the registrations.
Good enough. Mr. Whisker?
I had a quick update on the FEMA maps. Manager Blix did ask a question about that at the last meeting, and I'd never sent out an email, so I wanted to just take a few minutes now, if that's okay. So I did get a hold of folks at the DNR, and as you know, the communities had already been notified of the final publication of maps, and there was sort of this comment round, and we kept getting told in 6 months, it's 6 months. The answer I got is it's 6 months is when everything's going to be finalized. But I think we've got some level of definition now. In May, communities received letters from the DNR and FEMA informing the communities that actually have 6 months to adopt the new maps, which is the final step in making it completely official. So 6 months from May, communities are basically mandated to have the new flood maps. It's really not a major change for the district in terms of flood mapping and how we regulate, because the flood maps that FEMA has developed are based largely on our model, and those are the maps that we use for our floodplain regulation already. So it's not much of a change for us. It's more administrative than anything. The other thing that the DNR representative mentioned is that they may be looking at a letter of map revision as part of this process over the next several months to incorporate Lake Minnetonka and the 6 Mile Marsh area, which right now, if you look at the FEMA flood maps, while all the communities kind of regulate to 931.5, that 100-year elevation on the lake, if you look at the FEMA flood maps, there's a lot of areas that are marked Zone A and have poor definition and aren't part of the National Flood Insurance Program. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Manager Olson?
How many of our cities are participating in the program?
In the flood insurance program, I would assume pretty much all of them.
There's a lot of cities in Minnesota don't.
Right.
For lots of reasons. We discussed that at the meeting in Winona.
Right. I think, I don't know. I can find out, Manager Olson. If I had to guess on maybe one community that didn't, it would be Mound. I know that out of all the communities on the lake that use the 931 flood elevation, they've refused to do that. And I think the 931.5 is kind of what we've used, what FEMA uses, and is probably a prerequisite to receiving flood insurance. And that's probably has something to do with, keeping resident costs down, insurance costs down.
Yeah, because once the maps are drawn, mortgage companies step forward and say, now you have to get flood insurance. And you're sitting there going, I'm above the lake. I have this big lake in my backyard. What do you mean? They'll require it if you have a mortgage. So we have to be sensitive to that. That's one of the reasons why cities sometimes choose not to participate. Because you can't get it if the cities don't participate.
Correct. Yeah, I'll find out.
Excuse me.
Manager Miller?
So, if the cities don't participate, they're not eligible for insurance.
Everybody's
They're not
eligible.
mandated.
It's not mandated, but everybody's eligible.
Everybody's eligible, but if the cities don't participate, what does the mortgage company do? I was a little confused, but they require it, but if they don't. So is there any impact on the ability to get a mortgage that requires flood insurance if they're not participating?
That I'm not sure, but I know that if a city does choose to participate, and now the boundary includes your property and you have a mortgage, your mortgage company may require you to go get the insurance.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But if the city is not participating, then will the mortgage company know?
That I'm not sure of.
Okay.
Manager Blixt?
So my question is, do we know how many parcels are impacted by this? You know, that new either that they're now in the floodplain or parcels that got removed?
We do know, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, and I think we've presented those maps previously at the board meeting, but if that's something, you know, if you want those facts and figures, I can bring those to the board.
Well, since I'd be interested in just refreshing myself.
Sure.
Just to get a sense of,
Are you in it?
I don't know, I don't think so.
You
Not
are
that
now.
I know.
I'm just
I'm,
kidding.
yeah. Am I now? I don't know.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Is that all then? And we are adjourned.